So, as he said, I don't really actually know a lot about structural equation modeling. I use it, but I don't understand all the equations or the technicalities behind it. So how I sort of started using structural equation modeling and perhaps psychometric surveys was that we had a sort of a pressure to do surveys and questionnaires in our research project. And then I started thinking that how surveys should be done. And so the answer to that was that we should use psychometric measurement, and then what is the best way to analyze psychometric measurement is then structural equation modeling, and that's how I sort of ended up doing stuff with it. So as I'm not an expert in the technicalities or the maths behind it, this is going to be a very hands-on sort of tutorial kind of thing, what I do or we do with structural equation modeling. And I'm a bit afraid because there are these more sort of tenured and senior professors here who know a lot more about this topic than I do, so I feel sort of it's sort of not qualified in a way. And I also told Andreas a couple of times that I know nothing about this topic, but he insisted you have to come, so here I am. So basically, what and why. So psychometric measurement, as the name might sort of hint a little bit, is mostly used for measuring sort of psychological phenomena, like attitudes, beliefs, feelings, experiences, and stuff like that, which are very complex phenomena, right? So therefore, sort of the psychometric measurement attempts to measure the same phenomena of the feeling or attitude and so forth with many different items in a question, or different questions, or different statements. Probably every one of you have at some point in your life filled like those very, very long questionnaires, like with hundreds of questions, and then you put the thing at some place on the continuum, usually from 1 to 5, or 1 to 7, or 1 to 10. I did that in Army. There's a sort of a Finnish joke about the Army questionnaires where they ask about whether you want to become a florist and stuff like that, and then sort of everyone thinks, of course, if you rank very high on that scale, you're not going to become a captain or something higher in the Army, which is fun. And I think I failed that test. I didn't become. I became a coder, a nerd coder in the Army. So, well, anyway. And also my voice is a bit low because I'm a bit ill, but let's hope I'm gonna make it through with coffee. So basically, if you use psychometric measurement, you're basically almost pretty much bound to use some of the structural equation modeling software, which are, for example, the Amos, LISREL, SmartPLS, WarpPLS, and there are R packages too. I've never used them though. I mostly use SmartPLS or Amos, depending on whether I'm doing sort of a variance-based analysis or a component-based analysis, and I use SmartPLS. And today you'll see some of the SmartPLS, which I would say is easier. And if you're really trying to take up using structural equation modeling, that's probably the way to go to sort of get your head around that. So so as this is about play and stuff, I thought to sort of perhaps start with a bit more depressing kind of example. So here's a picture of this would be an Amos software, for example. This is a picture of an analysis of what leads to depression. So depression is measured with 3 different variables. These are probably like questions or statements in a survey. Same with here, they hypothesize or theorize that stress and anxiety are the sort of main determinants of depression, and then they also measure that with 3 different variables here and here. For example, those could be, let's say, cry easily. People would rate these. Do they cry easily? Are they afraid of crowds? Do they worry a lot? Stress would be measured maybe something like this, and depression with something else. And then you analyze that. So basically what the structural equation modeling do, and I think maybe someone here knows more about it, but the idea is that it composes a sort of a latent construct variable out of the specific observed variables in the questionnaire, which you have then in your data for every respondent of the data. And by the way, senior professors, feel free to pitch in if you have something important to say.
These anxiety and stress, so the labels are created by the model itself?
No, yeah, that's a good point actually. So everything here is purely theoretical in a sense. This does not exist at all. which is it's basically just composed out of the items which are in the survey.
So it's kind of a cluster analysis.
Yes, it's a factor analysis, confirmatory factor analysis. So you could also, I mean, some might be familiar with exploratory factor analysis, where you just have a bunch of items in a survey, for instance, and then you run an exploratory factor analysis and see like how they converge into different factors. But this is confirmatory mostly, so you decide beforehand which belongs to what, and of course you know that and have planned that already before sort of compiling the survey.
And it doesn't necessarily have to be items from the same questionnaire. You can use different questionnaires.
Well, you would have to have them for the same respondent. So if you have the different same people answering different surveys, that would be fine. So sort of the agenda, I was thinking like what would then be perhaps a good example of how to do this. So, because we happen to have measured flow in one of our surveys, and flow is a pretty sort of play and game-oriented psychological concept. I thought of maybe we can run sort of a model based on that. Was there any like people from practitioner side, industry side, like Lego or people? Any starting like PhD students or someone who's really actually interested in maybe trying this stuff out at some point? Cool. So good. So there's a sort of a receptive audience for this, because one thing what I thought about sort of we could try and do is to keep this, if this would change, and so I have to sort of go between software. So I set an ambitious goal. We're going to write a paper within the hour, or basically, you know, the portion of doing the results and perhaps like creating a sort of validity and reliability tables and such, which are usually the core parts of a empirical study like this. And of course, we've done a survey beforehand, which is has nothing to do with Lego, but we can sort of think it concerns Lego. We're playing with Lego, and we're looking at different components of flow state based on Csikszentmihalyi highly, however you pronounce that. Jonna can help me with that. And then we can also maybe, I'll sort of add it also further play intention maybe. We can sort of look at which of the components of flow then also lead to whether people want to play more in the future with Lego or whatever it might be. So the 9 components of flow, how many of you are familiar with the flow theory? Okay, pretty much everyone. So I guess there are like 2 main ways to understand flow. One is that it's sort of a balance of challenge and scale. But then the other one, sort of the more expanded version of it, is that it basically there's sort of 9 manifestations of flow, which are the balance, where the sort of the challenge and skill balance is basically only one of the components. So we're going to be looking at all the 9 components. The second one is the merging of action and awareness, i.e. one performs the activity almost automatically. Clear goals, clear feedback, focus/concentration, a sense of control of the activity, loss of self-consciousness or reduced awareness of self, of basically you're not thinking what other people are thinking about you while you're doing the task. Time transformation or loss of sense of time, and over-telling experience or / enjoyment of the task basically. I really like the flow theory anyway otherwise, because like everyone can sort of very intuitively recognize these feelings in themselves while they're doing some tasks, so it really makes sense in this context. So let's go back to the agenda slide. So I didn't show any examples, so maybe I'll show some examples now of the papers first, so you really sort of maybe paints the picture a little bit what we're doing. I'll just open up one of our papers, for instance. So here's one of our paper, which uses structural equation modeling. Here we looked at like what kind of variables at a certain abstraction level predict why people are willing to continue using a gamification service, which in this question was fitocracy. So basically, well, we don't really need to look at the introduction, but in studies like this, you commonly have like a model that you build based on theory, and then you hypothesize about the different relationship between the variables in the model. Like, we hypothesize like that the usefulness is positively associated with both the attitude and continued use of the service. And basically it's the same for all the variables in the model. And basically you have the hypotheses commonly in papers like this very explicitly stated out also in the background section. And of course then you have a lot of text that sort of justifies why it makes sense to hypothesize that these phenomena exist, which is usually also based on some theory, sometimes more strictly and sometimes more loosely. Then you have the data and methods, which describe how the data was gathered, where participant demographic factors of the participants, we won't be doing this today. Table of the constructs, how many items all the constructs had, the factors, and where they were adapted from. So usually the items are always by default adapted from an existing source which had already validated the items and the constructs. Often the case though is that they are not directly applicable, so they have to be sort of modified a little bit to fit the context, because sometimes the items just don't make any sense in the context that you're measuring them in. Then you have the sort of the very mandatory section as well, sort of the reliability and validity of the measurement, which is usually mostly reported in tables like this, which has the correlation matrix between the variables as well as average variance extracted, composite reliability, and alpha in this case. And then you basically have the same model which shows the sort of the path coefficients, and well, there's a statistical significance and so forth. But basically that's the sort of the structure of the paper, what it has. And it varies to some extent, of course, between disciplines and stuff like that. For instance, in education field, the paper might be a bit different. This is mostly management information systems. Right. So what's the next step then? Research problem, background theory, and research model. So we sort of already agreed, or I decided, it's going to be flow theory. So usually you would, of course, people have a research problem usually. Okay, I want to figure something out. We usually start that figuring out what is the sort of outcome variable that we're interested in. It might be learning, it might be why people use something, why they enjoy something, what determines their attitude towards some activity or something else. And so then the sort of the bigger question then is that, so what are we going to measure as those things that determine it? And that's usually based on then the sort of the selection of theory or the perspective that you're taking into the phenomena, because simply you cannot put everything in the world in the same model or paper or research, so you really have to sort of think about what that's going to be. And in this case it's going to be the flow theory. And basically then you would go and sort of build a research model. So let's see, which I've already done. So, it could be questioned forever whether this makes theoretical sense or not, but we are going to assume it makes a lot of sense. So what we're trying to now then do, that we're looking at so we're interested in looking at like what determines enjoyment of playing with Lego, all right? And we're using all the components of flow as determinants of the enjoyment of playing with Lego. And as it so happens, one of the constructs in the flow theory is the autotelic experience, which is very close to just enjoyment basically, so we're going to use that as the outcome variable. What we could maybe also do, which might be interesting, we could add here, say we also want to know how that enjoyment then leads to into heightened intentions to continue playing with Lego. And it's usually intention unless we have some sort of way to actually measure their actual behavior. But that's often very difficult in a survey, of course, because you can't measure actual behavior with the survey per se, at least not easily. What we also sometimes do is if we get back-end data from companies, then we can put that in the data set and look at their actual behavior in the game. The other way of doing this is to do 2 surveys and say after 3 months and then see their behavior or intentions and how they evolve during that time. But basically, so now we've sort of thought up a model which makes some theoretical sense, and why it's very important that it makes theoretical sense is that this data is cross-sectional and these are our correlations. So basically you can sort of imply causation based on this. So that's why we need a strong theory behind it to really sort of be at all sort of convincingly say that this leads to this. All right, so does it make sense this far?
Yeah, I'm not familiar with flow theory, and so what you're doing is, okay, flow theory originally states that there are these 9 components, and what you're doing is establishing causal relationships between them.
I'm establishing a causal relationship only with these 8 and the autotelic experience. Okay. And then with that, from there to the continuous use intention. And these would be then the hypotheses. So if we have this imaginary paper here, you know, we would have a strong story there about the background theory, and then we would say somewhere that, say hypothesis 1, what was the first one in there? Challenge skill balance is we would hypothesize something like that, and then we would of course have the same thing for all the different constructs, which I'm not gonna, you know, hypotheses. And yeah. And there's a lot of variation in the sort of how do you actually do this. In some papers you explain a lot and theorize a lot and justify the hypothesis separately and individually. Sometimes you see a sort of longer theoretical discussion, and then at the end sort of it just imply that these hypotheses then sort of logically follow from this discussion we've had.
You know, could you put up the model for us? So, could you just say, there's no clustering in the model, at least where it's at right now. It's just 8 predictors and 1 outcome.
Exactly.
So, can you just say a couple of words about why the structural equation modeling approach in a case like this is different than just a regression?
Well, it's not a lot different.
I just wanted to make sure there wasn't something that I was missing.
But one thing that SEM software does is it does the confirmatory factor analysis, at least in a way that is easy to use, and it's.
So you get fit indices, which is output from the confirmatory factor. Basically, the model that he's showing right here is just the multiple regression analysis. You've got your 8 variables predicting the measurement factor. And that's fine, and you get your R-square value or your CFI index, and you get your root mean square, you know, you get your error variance, and that's fine. But I think the main power of structural equation modeling comes from being able to insert all sorts of different relationships. So for example, you can have moderators, and you said that on a previous slide, you can have moderators and mediating variables and stuff. And typically what you do in a study like this is you posit a couple of different models, like maybe all these, I believe, have positive relations given my literature review that I did, or maybe there's some mediating or moderating effect. So you try out the different models using SEM or whatever, and you can actually compare the fit indices, and ultimately what I do is pluck out the one that has the best fit
Yeah.
indice and use that
Yeah.
as the model to explain, because it's all about the explanation. And to explain something, you need the fit indices, which you can get from, simple multiple regression or,
Mm.
other things with regard to SEM. But this by itself, the example, is just the basic story. I mean, the
Yes.
fun part, the power comes from having different functional relations and comparing those.
Yeah, that's true, and that would be lovely to do all that if we have time for that.
Yeah, but the simple tutorial, but that was a good question about, how's this differ from a multiple
But
regression?
even for for these purposes, you could just group those into, there's 8, so you could group them into 2 groups of 4 and just say arbitrarily, since the labels are arbitrary anyway, right? You
Yeah.
could say these 4
Oh.
travel together, these 4 travel together.
Yeah.
This one construct is loss in the experience, and this construct is enjoyment of the
Yeah.
experience, or something like
Yeah,
that.
Yeah, we could say, for instance, and I think this is what you're sort of also pointing to, is that we could have, say, this is getting a bit difficult.
Yeah, don't worry about
but-
that. Don't worry about the
But so
formatting.
sort of, yeah, so sort of we could say that, we could theorize that there's something before, say that we have merging action awareness, loss of time, loss of self-consciousness, which are perhaps more sort of, I don't know the correct word, but sort of, so, and I would actually think it would make sense that they would mediate effect of some of the some of the other constructs in here. So we could have like multiple levels going on in here. We would have like for instance, 4 constructs here, and then we would have 4 constructs here, and then we would be also looking at the relationship between these constructs and these 4 constructs, and then their relationship here. And we could also look at the indirect relationship, or the indirect effects and the direct effects, both. But that becomes a bit more complex, and now it looks like crap too. But anyway, and so I can show one example from another paper, and where we've done a bit like that. But I get also a couple of words about the model fit stuff, because model fit stuff is not usually done in the component-based structural equation modeling almost at all. There's no you can't even get CFI and those metrics from this.
what are you using?
The smart PLS. So there's, I'm not sure, but there's like kind of 2 schools of doing SEM. Other one is the sort of the variance or covariance-based SEM, which is you would use Amos, LISREL, and stuff like this. And then you have the component-based, which uses like smart PLS, warp PLS, and these software. And the PLS is more, it's simpler, and it's not so much concerned with model fits. It's more concerned of just about the path coefficients and the sort of the inner model. So for instance here, there's a model which looks at, so this is an example of an alternate version, which could be like you have 2 constructs here, and then they predict other constructs in the middle of the model, which then further predict the outcome variable, but there's also like the direct effect model here. So you can build all kinds of models based on what your theory and your background literature, and then you, of course, you make a hypothesis that makes sense in your case. Right. So the next step. So, and this is of course, people can do it in different ways, but like operationalizing the survey. So basically, you build the model first and theorize about the things and sort of have the model ready, and after that we usually start figuring out how we're going to operationalize the constructs. What different statement and questions are we going to have in this actual survey? And now we're talking about flow specifically. So one thing you could do, for instance, you can basically just search for flow scale. So I've searched here for with the keyword flow scale from the subject area of psychology, for instance. There are of course many different ways you can search for literature, but this is one. And in this list actually we find the measurement instrument that we're using in this example, which is the Jackson and Eklund 2002 study. It's in sports and exercise context, since in our study we looked at exercise gamification, so that's sort of why it's from there. So basically, do I actually have this study open somewhere? I think I do. So this was, for us for instance, this was a very good fit for our study, since they also come from the background that flow, where they lean on Csikszentmihalyi theory that there's 9 constructs to it. And here they, in this paper, they devise a measurement instrument for those 9 dimensions, which we then copy with slight alterations. Yeah. Which are here. So there's in here there's 4 items for every construct. For instance, for challenge skill balance, I am challenged, but I believe my skills allow me to meet the challenge. My abilities match the high challenge of the situation, and so forth. And then let's look at something else. Clear goals. I know clearly what I want to do. My goals are clearly defined. Control. I have sense of control over what I'm doing. And of course, if we think about this, for example, in the Lego context, I think a lot of them make sense in that context. Some of them might not make sense, and then you would perhaps tweak them a little bit. Another way of what we use, which I think is a good tool, especially in our field, because we are from my background is in business school and in information systems and management. So for instance, this in.theorizeit.org has a sort of repository of constructs and how they're operationalized in different studies. So for instance, we can here look for instance, challenge, and we'll find something when it loads. So it gives us a list of hits, for instance here, intrinsic motivation challenge. There's a journal where the study has been published when and by who, and then you can go here and see what kind of items they had in their survey. I believe developing open source software is an easy task, which would be reversed for challenge, and so forth. So this would be one way to do it. And what we then often do, if we, like for a lot of the studies, it's not as easy to use just one specific measurement instrument which would have a lot of constructs, but there's a measurement instrument for one thing, and then if in a survey you usually want to have more. So what we usually do then is that we have this kind of sort of survey composition table, where we then basically sort of paste things. For example, we could just paste in the items from that study if we thought that they made any sense, and then there's usually some sort of, here would be a Likert. The study probably has strongly disagree, which would be 1, to strongly agree, which would be 7, and then we would and it was from a study called, who were they? Ravi. And we would say here Ravi et al. Year. And this would be like challenge. And then we would fill out the ID later when we know the actual composition of the survey. And usually at the stage when we're still unsure about the items we're going to put in the survey, we just list a lot of them in here. And then sort of start looking through different papers and different measurements, whether they make any sense in the context that we're trying to measure them in, and whether they are a good fit and sort of a good fit to all the other construct measurements we want to use. And then at some point when we're sort of happy with that, we sort of converge on a set of questions and statements. Sometimes, well, usually we prefer use the existing ones directly, if that's possible, and if it's not possible, then we adapt them and modify them, and sometimes we even combine across studies. Some people say that you should not do that because they are not validated as such, but we validate and look at the reliability and validity in any study anyway ourselves, so valid anyway, so I'm not sure if that's that important. All right, let's go to the next step, unless you have any questions about I mean, this is going to be like a super fast tutorial anyway, but so there's a lot of gaps, but I think the goal is to give you sort of an overview to the process of how we do this stuff. All right, we'll look at the survey template, survey question organizations, yeah, then collecting data. Well, collecting data, well then you would put the survey that you've composed into a survey software, which there are many. We have used WebRepol mostly because it allows many different kinds of question types. It allows customized email spamming, basically. So you can add a bunch of emails there and you'll send it to all of those emails, which is good, especially when working with companies, because sometimes companies have a bunch of people who have agreed to partake in research, and then we can sort of directly give those emails the link to the survey software. Did you, Jonna, have something to say?
Yeah, I could maybe add something. I have mostly been the person responsible for the data collection and data management in the two-person team that we have, so I can say something. For us, it has been basically a kind of like chosen tactic always, also like when conducting these surveys, that we try to include in surveys many different models in a way. Like we gather a lot of data at once. Like here you was, for example, using the flow example that, okay, we had a instrument, survey instrument containing the variables related to flow, but in the same survey we often gather data on several other theories. So we have this tactic of doing basically this quite large scale surveys, gathering a lot of data at once, and then you're able to quite flexibly afterwards also like do this. Of course, we have like when doing the survey, like you explained, we do have our research like theoretical background, what kind of model we're testing on each of the theories and so on. But then again, it allows for this, what Valerie was also mentioning, that you can also check for these mediations and so on, like later on, quite flexibly when you have gathered a lot of data at the same instance. So in that sense, it has been a kind of a good tactic for us. And of course, there are then these all survey technical issues you need to consider. Of course, like when you have a long survey for people to answer, it does affect their willingness to answer. For example, it's kind of a balance, of course, always, but that has been our approach to this, and in that way we have been able to, like said, quite flexibly then after gathering data to also testing models and so on.
So you mean you're including items that are directly related to the hypothesis that you're going to test, or?
Well, I mean that we have, for example, when we gather data about food accuracy, we have the flow theory there. We also had this like survey instrument in the same survey about, for example, like technology adoption. We wanted to also test that, so we included those, and then we had some other, I don't remember exactly, but we had those like in the same survey. So simply like as some kind of a mention about this. How we
do you ever have any considerations on how related they must be? Because the way that you're putting it, I would make them a bit unrelated, so they're a bit like confounder questions also.
Well, of course, they're all related in that case. For example, the use of the service that they're all like about. We have, for example, questions about the use of the service. Then we have questions about how they enjoy using the service, how useful they perceive it. Then we have also, like, for example, these flow-related questions, but they all are about the same service, like use of the same service. So in that sense, at least I would think there is this coherence to that when the people reply to it, that they are replying about their experience with that service. So, yes.
Are you guys piloting this stuff before you administer it?
Yeah.
And then have you we all use Mechanical Turk over here.
Yeah.
Have you heard of it? Or-
Yeah.
We have
so-
heard of course, but haven't used it. We have
As-
used real respondents.
As a,
like,
wa-
yes,
as a
services.
kind of quick and dirty way to,
Yeah,
get lots of
of
responses
course,
and
of course,
for
yeah. That's,
pre-cleanup kind of
Yes.
things. And
that's possible.
I guess the story about how you're figuring out reliability and validity is coming up.
Mhm.
Yes.
Okay. So I'll wait.
Yeah, I mean, I guess the validity and reliability might be a bit more simple in the this STEM method than in the AMS stuff. Because in the AMS it's a lot more about the model fit stuff and that kind of things. So basically, so this is also like very practical stuff, how you actually do the analysis and how you do it in the software. So this is the Smart PLS. I think it currently, I think an academic license is about, I don't know, 500 per year or something, I'm not sure, something like that. So basically, it's sort of a drag and drop game. So basically, you just put variables in there. So this would be a construct, like we saw in here. So these would be like the constructs here. So we put here like the autotelic experience. And then basically we have the survey data here with the items coded as some sort of scheme, like for instance these are the autotelic experience questions in the survey, the items. So basically they are the ones in here. Where's the autotelic? Right now I'm not sure actually which one is which, but so basically these four things here are these four questions on a survey, and represent the answers that the respondents of the 200 respondents we have on this survey have reported. So I'm not actually even know how much time I've used thus far. Does anyone have any idea about that?
You can take another 10 minutes.
Okay, alright, okay. So then I'm far behind, but it's okay. So to save time, here is a model that I already drew, which is now basically the same, or exactly the same as in here, without this one. And of course now it's a bit of a mess, but anyway, it's these 8 constructs here predicting the autotelic experience in the model. And all these yellow ones are the actual items on the survey, which and the constructs here are composed out of those items. And in the software basically, so this is the sort of the part where you don't really have to know anything to use this. So basically you have a calculate button here. I think the professors are looking have a very skeptic. So basically this is the algorithm that calculates it. So it's basically a multiple regression, but it also like composes the constructs out of the items. And I'm not sure if you can see anything right now because it's pretty small. But so what it does is it does the confirmatory factor analysis, and these are the loadings of the items to the construct itself, which basically pretty much represent their correlation to the sort of the mother construct after it's composed. These lines here are the inner model. Are the path coefficients between the constructs, which are standardized path coefficients. And maybe a professor can give us a very good definition of a path coefficient in a regression model.
They're factor loadings.
These ones?
Oh, no, I'm sorry, I'm looking at your factor loadings.
Yeah, these are factor loadings, yes. Well, anyway, so one way to think about the numbers here is that if control grows by 1, autotelic experience would grow by 0.278.
Just the betas.
Yes.
Just the betas.
Yes. there's the effect size which is the R squared in the dependent variable. So and I think we're not going to be able to sort of write the whole paper here, but so we can look at the reliability and validity, so which is usually measured by at least 3 or basically 2 ways, which is the average variance extracted of all the constructs. Usually in literature the accepted threshold is 0.5 for constructs. For composite reliability it's usually the suggested threshold is 0.7. So in this case, so this software gives you these bars which are nicely green if the thresholds are exceeded, and then they're red if they are not. And then you have the discriminant validity. So these metrics basically tell you whether the constructs work in a way, whether they measure a consistent phenomena, whether the different items in the construct are correlated highly enough for it to make any sense to put them in the same construct, basically. Whereas then you have discriminant validity, which informs you about whether these constructs are different enough from each other. Since if all the constructs would just be the same, it wouldn't make any sense to measure them separately either. And it wouldn't make any sense otherwise either. Yeah. So basically the sort of Fornell-Larker criterion, which is usually also used in the Amos way, right? And
I didn't hear you.
so the Fornell-Larker criterion is probably also what you use, for instance, in SEM studies.
And R.
Okay. So basically, it shows the correlation between the constructs, and if they're high, then it usually suggests that there's a problem. For instance, here we see that the challenge skill balance and clear goals, for instance, the correlation for that is above 0.7, which is pretty high. Same for control. One of the sort of rules of thumb has been that if any of the correlation between constructs is more than 0.7, it usually can lead into multicollinearity problems. The more often used criterion, though, is that the square roots of the AVE of each construct should be larger than the intercorrelations between constructs. Which at least we see in a lot of papers that it's sort of used as the main indicator of having no problems with discriminant validity. Alright, but as I'm so low on time, so basically then if we at least assume that there's no problems, and that everything was reliable and valid, we could basically report this in a paper. Usually you don't in a figure or somewhere report the loadings of the items. You usually, well, that also depends on the field. Like I see in some of your papers, you also have the factor loadings. I think in the figures in the paper, a lot of people, at least researchers in papers in psychology especially, put them in the same one. But usually in the area we work, that's not usually the case. They're usually reported in an appendix as a list of loadings, item loadings for the different constructs. So basically then you could report this. I would usually put this in the PowerPoint as it would look nicer, and report all the path coefficients and the effect sizes in there, as was, for example, the case in some of the papers here, for instance. So this is basically the same as this. And oh yeah, one thing we didn't do yet.
When you go back to what you just showed us, where do they get their, the stars indicate?
Yeah, I was just getting into it. So in here you use bootstrapping, which David will explain to you.
Sure, she can explain the objective. We use it in ENA too. Essentially, all you do is just imagine that you took the data and you just resampled it. So if I had 1,000 data points, I would construct a set of 1,000 by randomly choosing from that original 1,000, but with replacement. So I might get one set that had the first 500 repeated twice. I might get another set that had the first 200 repeated 5 times. I might get another set that had exactly the same 1,000. So I'm creating multiple sets of data where I'm selectively, effectively throwing away some of the existing data. And then I run the model over and over and over again. What that's essentially doing is, it's the same trick we were using with Kappa.
Yeah.
That what that's creating is a distribution for each of those values. So I see what, sometimes there's a few sets where it's really small, there's a few sets where it's really large, and the distribution looks like this. And then I just I empirically create the 95% confidence interval. So I get the confidence interval. If that contains 0, then it's not statistically significantly different from 0, and so it's not statistically significant. If it doesn't contain 0, then it's statistically significantly different from 0, and that's what peer groups are true.
And here we're doing 1,000 subsamples. And yeah, because it's actually doing something, basically simulating in a way, so it takes a little bit of time even. And so basically it gives you t-values here, which can be then converted to p-values, which are usually then represented as stars, and which are also reported in the software directly. So here you have the p-value in the last column. I'm not sure if I can make this any bigger, but then of course it's a question of, different disciplines and different schools of thought use different p-thresholds. We usually use 0.05. In some cases that's even too high, and so it's really up to like looking at what kind of effect size and stuff you're looking at. And I also agree with David that there's a lot of problems in reporting results in a larger scale. You can find almost anything to be significant statistically if you have large data or enough large data. So it's really more important to look at the effect size and so forth. And this happens like everywhere, that it's, if it's significant, it's great result automatically almost. So then you would, of course, you could, for instance, here we actually also have the 0.1, but I believe in the results then we also, and the discussion sort of a bit more skeptically discuss about the results. So one thing is to have the mathematical results there, but then it's more important to discuss them in a realistic manner. And I think if I'm low on time, I think this might be a good point to stop and sort of go for questions. And I hope this made any sense, because it was pretty brief in a way to a